Humans of the cardboard, welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today, small little sprinkling of news, just one little card for Infinite Forbidden. They're trickling down, the end of the line here. Got, I think, just under 30 cards left, so good amount still, but just one card today as we head into the weekend. This card is not technically an Orcus card, but it obviously has Girsu and Galatea in the artwork, and they're fighting a big dragon, so I don't know about that, but it's an interesting card. I gave it a quick read before I started the video, and it's interesting. I don't know if I'm fully in on it, but it is a card where I go, there's definitely could be something here, but we'll have to see. So, this is Vesper Girsu, or Flash of the Evening Star. Sounds a little more accurate for TCG purposes. Is a quick play spell card. You can only activate one card of this card's name per turn. If your opponent controls two or more monsters than you do, your opponent can send any number of monsters they control to the graveyard. Also, you apply this effect based on the number they control. So, I believe the way this is going to work is when you activate this, your opponent is going to have a choice whether or not they want to send any of their monsters to adjust the number they control to see what effect will actually go into place here. So it's kind of, I think the idea is you want to stick your opponent between a rock and a hard place. There's no right option. It's lose-lose. But there's something to be said about letting your opponent choose in the first place. But anyway, if they control no monsters, let's see, number they control. Yeah, so if they control no monsters, you have your life points. If they control one monster, they gain 2,000 life points. If they go down to two monsters, banish your opponent's entire hand face up until the end phase. And 3, your opponent cannot activate monster effects for the rest of this turn. 3 or more monster effects for the rest of the turn. So I think the idea here is that if they can't have 2 or 3 or more, right? Because those effects are just insane, right? Locking your opponent out of monster effects, period, for the rest of the turn, that probably means they just don't play for the rest of the turn. So even though they may have 3 or 4 monsters on the field, like, they're not going anywhere else, and as long as they're not killing you, you're essentially ending their turn for the most part. Second effect, banish your opponent's entire hand face up until the end phase. That's another kind of brutal one. The one I don't love about this is that, like, just to even activate this card, your opponent already has to have at least 2 more monsters than you, which means to even, like, get to this, your opponent has to have already, like, played a good little bit, which means they may have been able to use a lot of, like, if they only have 2 cards in hand, like, maybe there's a world where they're like, fine, I've got more than enough stuff on field right now to play, to keep going here. Or, right, just in general, it's fine. So, and then these ones are obviously, like, not good, but the idea is, if you had at least 1 monster on the field, that means your opponent had 3 or more when you activate this card, which means if they're sending 2 to 3 monsters from their field to the graveyard, 2 or more, at least, right? It could be 3, could even be 4, but that's probably the ceiling here. Forcing them to send all that is still kind of a win in your own book, right? Even if they gain 2,000, even if they cut your life points in half, if this is just a quick Raigeki for the most part, that's still pretty decent. I don't like how much control this gives your opponent, right? There's big gripes I have here, and I think the 2 biggest ones is, 1, this part, right? The activation requirements of your opponent needing 2 more monsters than you. If it just said if your opponent controls 2 or more monsters, the problem then it's 2 more than you. So that also pigeonholes the types of decks you can even play this in, right? If you play a deck that ends on 2 monsters as your end board, which is, I would say, almost below average, or a lot of decks like 3 are closer to 3 or 4 end board monsters. And right, so then just even activate this card, your opponent, if you have 2, your opponent has to put at least 4 monsters on the field. That's so late in the turn, you know what I mean? You want to stop your opponent earlier than that. And so, like, it makes me think, like, okay, what are we even talking about with this card? Are we talking about, like, Runic? You have to play this card in something like Runic Stun, or you might only have 1 or even no monsters, depending on, if you're your opponent was able to like run over the one you left up in the EMZ, right? Like, or Sky Striker that plays mostly through one monster on the field at more often than not, or at least ends on one monster on the field normally. Like, what are we talking about here? Like how many decks are ending on one monster only? Because even if you end on 2, 4 is a lot. If you end on 3, which is like average, they have to put 5 monsters on the field, and it's a quick play. So, I mean, I guess going second is like a thing, but even going second is bad, because if you look at it from a going second standpoint, this one comes too much into play, right? If they have a fully built board with 3 or 4 monsters on the field, and you go activate this card, and then they banish that they control 2, or so that they send cards that they control 2, and then they still have like a Barone and a, whatever the other interruptive monster on the field could be, and then they banish their whole hand. But like, let's say they ended on a full board, and so they're only banishing like 1 card from hand. I mean, there's still value there, I guess, but it just still, I just hate letting your opponent choose. I really, really do. Because it feels like there can always be some out for them to kind of like wiggle. There's just too many options here. If it was like one thing or the other, and it was like one was, and like they both really, really hurt, but it's part of it's that there's like 4 options here, so they can kind of pick and choose where the middle ground is for them, where they're like, okay, I'm only losing like 1 monster here, and then I only have like 1 card in hand I'm losing that I don't care about. Like, that's fine, right? I just don't like the idea of giving your opponent that many choices. Of course, paired with the giving them, needing them to have 2 or more monsters than you do. I guess that's probably the best application, though, is at least going second. But with like Yu-Gi-Oh nowadays, and like most boards that go full wombo combo, like there's a good chance they have a negate, aside from like specific formats and specific archetypes. Like, I don't know. I think it's an interesting card. There's a lot going on with it, but I just think giving your opponent a choice like this is just never going to be the answer, right? But listen, there is some strong payoff here in certain instances, so I kind of got into the nooks and crannies of this card a little bit. This card probably didn't deserve a 7 or 8 minute video, but that's where we're at today. So let me know your thoughts down below on this card. Is this card actually interesting, or is this card just you read it once and you're like, nah, no, not going to be it if you let your opponent choose? I totally get it, because that's kind of where I'm at with it. But let me know your thoughts down below if there's anything spicy with this card that you think actually gives it real potential. And stay tuned for more. Subscribe to the channel for more news. Like I said, still like 30 cards here. We still have the Light Legendary Duelist pack. We just started Animation Chronicle, which is going to get a good amount of reveals over the next 2 months, and even more than that. And next week we also get the Legacy of Destruction TCG exclusive portion of the set. So a lot of exciting stuff coming, but I'll keep you posted on all that. So stay tuned, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.